when I was working with the beer guys, the big thing that we thought about was volume. We're chasing
Yeah,
volume.
I remember those hecky days.
Yeah. So you were just chasing heckies.
Hectoliters.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about being in and around the liquor industry, well, I don't think you can avoid it in South Africa, actually. And you can be like, especially if you're a marketer. And the conversation I was having with Wandile, our brother, we were actually talking about this leading up to this conversation that we're going to have. Because the funny thing is that this conversation, guys, is a conversation that we started having at our uncle's 70th. Sorry, let me actually get into it. So, this is my brother, Ongeziwe Masonwabe. Masonwabe Lupuwana. He's an accomplished marketer. He's always been brand side. He's been client side. I've been unfortunate to be agency side. We do the work. He does the no, yes, no. I'm joking. There's a lot more than that.
I'd like to believe so.
There's a little bit more than that. And we thought that this would be an interesting conversation for the average South African, right, to get to understand the liquor, the global as well as the Southern African and the South African liquor and beverages industry a little bit better. I thought there's a piece that's going to come out about this conversation, but I wanted to have a fuller conversation with somebody who has earned their stripes within the space, has understood the trends over a decade and a half now, almost. Yeah. Over a decade and a half within the space, who's gone from being somebody who is in the student market to the energy drink market to the biggest or the second biggest at the time, the second biggest brewer on the planet, then moving on to one of the largest, I'd say multi-varied liquor and beverage brand companies on the planet, Pernod Ricard. So I wanted us to have a full conversation around all of the different impacts. And I think we want to bring it back down to how people understand what they're drinking, why they're actually drinking, because as I said, there's two sides of this thing. There's marketers, there's guys like yourselves who hold the brands, who are custodians of brands, and who ultimately control how brands, liquor brands or beverage brands come out into the market, how they resonate. And there's people like us who have to come up with the ideas based off your guys' visions to put it together so that when somebody sees an advert, sees a post on social media, goes to an activation, sees a billboard, bumps into somebody on trade offering them, hey, do you want to try this? But it goes really nicely with this. Somebody's actually thought about that. But I also wanted to have a rounded conversation, and I think that's what's really going to give people a lot of perspective around the movements, around palettes, the changing of palettes, and how brands have accommodated that over the decades, actually, because this is going to be terrible. I'm going to show my age, but 37. I've been having alcohol for almost 18 years now. 18 years. Yeah. Right? Yep. And after 18 years and having been next to the industry in various forms through advertising and marketing, I've also learned a little bit about myself, but there's always so much to learn. Sure. So I think, but before we get into sort of like that, I want people to understand who you are and how you get to sit in the place where you are a global marketing manager at Pernod Ricard, and you do that successfully in the Euro market as well as other global markets. So who is Oz and how does he get here?
All right, so let's maybe start the journey in first year, university, actually. Yeah. So that's where I kind of joined. I was a brand ambassador, a campus brand ambassador for an RTD brand, the biggest vodka in the world, actually. Yeah. And they were doing RTDs, so I was the guy who put the parties together. Ready to drink. We've got to bring people along. Okay, so that's where the genesis of the journey begins.
Are you going to mention brands or must I mention them?
You can mention them.
You can't mention them.
At this point in time, I don't feel too comfortable mentioning the brands, but what I'll do is I'll give you the sort of I'll give you enough runway for you to know exactly who I'm speaking about or what I'm speaking about. So
1818.
So yeah. So I was I did that in my first year.
Yeah.
So I was the first guy in the first year, or the first person in the first year
Ever.
of university.
Yeah, ever. I remember.
So that was quite a unique thing for me. And I studied law, by the way. I'm a law graduate. That's my sort of
adverts, and
it gives me the urge. So I started there, and I did that for, I'm going to say, a year. And then I became a campus manager working for a youth marketing agency.
Yeah.
And I did that for a number of years, and I worked on brands again.
I think we can talk about them because it's on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, look, Student Village.
Student Village. Student Village. Spin agent.
Yeah. So I moved.
You were the youngest spin agent in the entire country ever.
Yeah.
Do they pick younger guys after
look,
you?
Younger than that, you're going straight to high school.
Okay, right? So you were the Cole Palmer of like spin agenting.
Basically, Michael Owen.
Yeah.
That kind of real. Yeah. And I did well in that. I moved on to being a campus manager. So I worked with brands, all sorts of brands, lots of campaigns.
Yeah.
So much so that even for the 2010 World Cup, I was able to watch a lot of the games.
Yeah.
Through that exposure with brands and working on that. And then I moved on to working for the #1 energy drink in the world as a campus brand manager.
Red Bull. I'll say all the brands.
Yeah. So I did that. Had a lot of fun doing that in my final year of university. Learned a lot again. So throughout university, I was at the coalface of marketing.
Did you, just quickly, did you guys purposefully pick great looking ladies to drive those Mini Coopers? Was it a thing that you guys purposefully did, or you were like, oh, they fit our brand?
So to be 100% with you, I never worked on the side where I was hiring people.
Okay.
So I cannot talk about the sort of how they select talent and what it's based on. But I worked with, I worked with the Wings team.
Yeah.
So the ladies that you're talking about, and a lot of them have gone on to have fantastic careers.
Yeah, that's also the thing. It was a great stepping stone for them.
Yeah. From there, then I did modeling and acting for a year. So I was the biggest show.
You were also on television, right?
Yeah.
You were like, what's it, MJ, Knack Music. We definitely have to insert like a short clip here somehow of this guy on Generations.
I was MJ for a while. And then I joined the #1 liquor company in South Africa, which was the second biggest brewer in the world at the time.
Yeah.
In a cross-functional, I'd say brand execution.
Yeah.
Brand execution. The beer space globally, but let's talk about South Africa because that's where I worked in it, it is a very sales-focused organization. The marketing's phenomenal, don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
However, distribution and sales of beer, that's how beer really sort of chugs along.
Yeah.
And that's also, you got to think about things like the stock age, and that you need to actually sell it out before it expires.
So beer does expire.
Beer does expire.
That's it's always one of those questions that people have around, oh, this is a flat beer. For the really big beer drinkers, when your beer's a bit off. Or something, it's too watery, or there's just a bit of off taste. So yeah, guys, like beer does expire. I
think where you probably experience that a bit more is when you get beer on tap.
The kegs.
So how fresh the keg is. So when I would say my recommendation always to people is when you go and ask which one moves the most.
Yeah.
Because that will have the freshest keg. That tends to be sort of the thing.
So take me then from you being a beer merchant. I think it was a beer merchant that was the role.
It was
sales and marketing together.
You're a market developer.
Yeah.
So I worked through sort of Pretoria region.
Yeah.
Which was called the North region, focusing on Pretoria, looking at both on-premise, so on-premise being bars, restaurants, hotels, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then off-premise, which is your bottle stores and sort of, where you can, off consumption, you buy it and you go consume it at home.
Yeah.
On consumption is you consume it there at the place. And then we also looked at what we'd call non-traditional spaces. So I was looking at festivals. One that I'd worked on was Homecoming. I'll make an example, which is massive now.
Yeah.
So as they were coming up, I also worked with those guys too when I was working in that role. I then moved from that organization.
Yeah.
For various reasons. I think my #1 reason was I wanted global exposure and experience. in as much as I may have gotten it or received it at that organization, it just would have happened at a much further sort of down the line thing where they were only really giving guys that opportunity
from South Africa up
globally. So I kind of went, let me take I'd say a gamble on myself, and I moved to the second biggest spirits company in the world. In South Africa. And there the role that was called a brand ambassador. But however, the way I'd kind of done that role was more around...
This was with Jameson, yeah?
Jameson, yes. I worked on Jameson as a brand ambassador. And it was a brand activation. There was a lot of sort of activation space that we're looking at. I was looking at consumer education. So getting people to understand why they should perhaps select Jameson from a taste perspective. And just educating the consumer, making sure that they understand why they're drinking, what they're drinking, and what it is. And then also looking at key insights, trends, and keeping the brand at the edge of culture. And that's kind of what I was doing in that role.
So now take me from. So this was a really important part for me to kind of illuminate to myself and to also I think people when we had this pre-conversation at home. What is so Jameson becoming one of, if not the top whiskey brands in the country, doesn't happen by mistake or by chance. There was a shift in the market that was done deliberately by Jameson to place itself there. And my question kind of comes from trying to understand what was done deliberately, because there was a point in time where Jameson was like uber exclusive. And I know for people now, kind of, Jameson is kind of like freely available, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. But for somebody who kind of came into Johannesburg in 2006, there was a little bit of a upper market feel when it came to Jameson. There were the Jameson OTT over-the-top parties, which were super exclusive. I mean, I think I only ever got like invited to like 2, and like 1 I was invited, the other one I was like a +1. That's how like super exclusive it was. And then from there, Jameson kind of starts to take off. Maybe give us a little bit more insight into how a brand like Jameson kind of, relative to its heritage, its Irish heritage, because I think you'd been on a couple of trips too where they actually distill it and etc. Understanding what it was and what it needed to become in South Africa to become one of the premium whiskey brands. Take us through that journey from a brand building perspective.
So it's something that I'm also doing a bit of more research on, funny enough, having worked on the brand, and I worked on the brand in South Africa. I must also qualify and go, I worked on it for 2 years. But the people I worked on it with had been on the brand for a significant amount of time. So I kind of got a fairly good understanding how it was built ground up through conversation and getting a good understanding. I joined into that business specifically for that brand because I was quite passionate about the brand. We'd done the OTTs. I mean, we'd been to a few. So let me maybe qualify there first and go. So my understanding of it, and I'll say my understanding of it, is that the product comes in 1994, being brought in by a local entrepreneur. I won't name his name. Great entrepreneur in the spirits space and business, and he's still doing very well with his business. He brings it in, and he starts basically the local affiliate of Pernod Ricard. And again, very much a ground up. Using the brand ambassador to come in, go to the bars, target the bars, get people drinking, talking about the brand, but not talking about it, but just actually experiencing it. So, and
tasting.
Big thing about Jameson is that it fits the South African palate. It's soft. It's a smooth whiskey, and it's easy. It's actually very easy to drink and easy to mix. So I'd say the reason to believe. So a big thing within sort of the marketing space, and specifically in the premium, super premium alcohol space, the RTB, the reason to believe. And for Jameson, that was quite an easy one, which was triple distilled, twice as smooth. Now that clear communication message that stuck for a very long time was very clear. So what's your call to action? What's and that's it. Like, why should we drink? It's triple distilled, which makes it twice as smooth. So when you pick it up and you drink it, that's what you taste. It's sort of that. So that reinforcement happens from a product perspective. The reason to believe was very easy. So let's start there. Perhaps that's the genesis. So when the guy coming in doing the tastings at the bars and comparing it against other spirits or other whiskeys, it was an easy one to do. And I mean, I did it myself for 2 years. That's an easy sort of like for like comparison.
Yeah.
But then now you need to talk about, I'd say, that brand specifically from a premiumization ground up over a 30-year period, essentially. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And first of all, again, that clear communication and messaging over time. And then literally going from a distribution perspective, making sure that they're doing the right, showing up the right way in the off trade. Again, that thing what I was talking about, off consumption. Showing up effectively in the off trade. The advertising, again, reinforcing a specific mindset for consumers to understand. So making it easy to understand, making it easy from a passion point perspective. So it's really understanding how the premiumization strategy over a 30-year period happened. But Jameson, when I looked at the numbers and how it happens, I think around 2006, in that early 2000s into mid 2000s space.
That's when Zim got to varsity.
It starts doubling. It starts doubling its volumes. It starts doubling its volumes. And what it did effectively, and I was again looking at some consumer research some time ago, and I was still working in the business. It had this thing of being premium but unpretentious. So the brand itself is easily approachable. So everyone feels like they can drink a Jameson. But what you don't really see fully is how they did their pricing. And
I was literally about to ask, how does the pricing, because no one, maybe let's say in my cohort of people and my grouping of millennials, I don't think there's ever been a time where we've complained that the pricing of Jameson is incorrect for what you get. And even as we kind of got a little bit older and we could afford a little bit more, and you still kind of fell back onto Jameson to say, no, but I like this. And I think a lot of times, and maybe you can speak to that as well, the palate, you've kind of touched on that, but I learned through a lot of times that we would go out and we would kind of, as you were getting a lot more understanding into whiskeys, I started to also understand whiskeys a lot better. And what shocked me was that whiskeys are not really about the price, they're about the taste. It's not about the age, sorry. It's not about the age or price, it's about the taste. It's what your palate actually responds to. Yeah.
So with that brand specifically and that product specifically, you can, in this particular market, it was unisex acceptable.
Yes.
So you could mix it with, that was the big thing. So again, like taste there,
yes, both guys and girls could get in.
So that was the big thing. So if you remember at some point, people were drinking it with appetizer.
Yes.
Super sweet.
Yeah.
But you could drink it neat.
Yeah.
It was easy to drink. So
and also the places you could drink it, because you could get a bottle in a club and be okay with it during a time where a lot of people were having vodka, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So, and that's the thing. So it became also, then so there's that aspect of it. Then there's the other aspect of it making it cool. How do you make a brand cool? How do you, we've spoken about the product side, but how do you make the brand cool? And so you've got these niche events that we're talking about, these niche events, niche experiences, OTT, being the one I think we first sort of encountered. That give it that cool, exclusive, sexy appeal. Really. That really made it appealing then to go, in my mind, how do I envision it? And that's how that sort of premiumization happens in the mind, really. And then it gets reinforced. So in marketing, you have the segmentation, STP. You start there, segmentation, targeting, positioning. And that happens in all then your marketing mix. So you've got your 4 Ps of marketing, product, place, price, promotion. So that, now you've got the STP. This is where the guys were very clear in my view of where they wanted to go with the brand and then how to get there and what to do. And that's how that, that's how that premiumization happens.
As you're talking about, I'm thinking about from a ad man perspective, they really got it right in the sense that they pushed a lot of multiculturalism into their adverts quite early. And that did not actually, it didn't push anyone away. It felt normal. Like if you look at ads around the time, like 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe even 10, look at the Jameson sort of the advertising and how they showed up in different sort of places. They made sure that there was always like male and female. It's very multicultural. There's the white guy, there's the black guy, there's the cool stylish guy in the grouping, and it was a key thing. And I think what I also want to kind of maybe unpack for people is that in beverage space, and maybe you can speak to this, there was a lot of momentary based advertising. So you kind of had to show people where to enjoy and how to enjoy this particular beverage.
Occasion based, yeah.
So
what's the need state? What's the occasion? So that's what you're talking about from the other side now.
Yeah.
We'd sit there and go, what need state do we address and what's the occasions
Yeah.
that we address? And so that's occasion-based marketing, basically. What Jameson, again, I think that brand, I mean, if we were to hop on, we could hop on that brand specifically for a very long time. But again, they've made the right moves. Again, as you say, the slots, the time slots, the 8 o'clock movie that we were all glued to, they'd advertised just before that. So they brought out the right advertising times, spaces, and then also billboards. There's that big iconic one in Cape Town that as you're coming into the city, boom, they had that big one. And so buying the right type of media buying quite early on, very sharp, very smart about it. Pack shot, triple distilled, twice as smooth, easy, clear. As you see it, you know exactly what it's about. And then that premiumization, for them, it's in the liquid. Our liquid, basically, they were just like, our liquid is better than everyone else. And that was it.
So we'll come back to the sort of your Pernod journey and everything and how that fits into how you become a global marketing manager. But I want to then kind of unpack at that exact same time as you get into the beer market, because I think a lot of times there was a lot of movements in South Africa around beer. Amstel going, then there was what is that? The Amstel SAB conversation and how they kind of split, and then we had what was that beer that took over for like a little bit?
Don't say Mars and Gold.
Mars and Gold, was it Mars and Gold? Mars and Gold, yes.
Yeah.
Then there was Mars and Gold for a bit, but there were a lot of movements and shifts, and then there were the green bottles, right? And how those kind of shifted. I know that maybe a lot of people who are watching this might kind of still remember, but there was a huge premiumization of beer in the eyes of South Africans when it came to brown versus green bottles. And maybe can you give us an understanding from the inside how you guys started to see that? Because I know that you worked on Miller as one of the brands, and Miller was clear bottle. So it was, how did that present itself to the market, and how was breweries thinking about how to actually get into spaces?
So if I look at my journey in that organization, look, I'm not going to, again, I need to qualify. I worked there for 2 years. I worked in the international premium beer division. I worked on 2 brands. So the international sort of beers, one was Miller Genuine Draft, the other one was Grolsch. The green bottle, I'd use the word genesis of it. International. That's the green bottles that we know is Amstel, Heineken. Right. Comes into, that's, from a South African perspective, that's our understanding from a green bottle. Several brands had tried it before. One of them that actually the brand collapsed after they went that direction, they probably premiumized too soon, too quick, was Lion Lager.
Oh, yes.
Lion Lager died a swift death because of that. Again, from my understanding, from what people had told me anecdotally, I didn't do the research, but I'd spoken with enough guys at the time in that organization, and that's what that. If I look at Castle Light again, don't want to speak ad nauseum about them because I didn't even work on the brand, but I worked close enough with the guys who worked on the brand with the team. They first went, they were brown bottle, then they went green. And then it still wasn't quite, it didn't pick up, it didn't take off. If you remember at some point, the whole slogan was the one to have when you're having more than one.
More than one, yeah.
So they were like, oh no, we're lower ABV. But where they actually got it right was when they extrapolated cold.
Yes.
And then they started bringing innovation into it.
Which is what
packaging.
Which is almost like how it's like the taste, how to have it. What Jameson was doing in terms
100%.
of these are the occasions. This is how you have great Jameson. So in the beer market, in the beer space, that was also happening.
100%. Then of course we can talk about the gym bros coming in and thinking about, okay, it's quite healthy, it's lower ABV, it's slight on taste. You can have more da 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 and all of that. But that extrapolation of cold and that cold technology,
elevated,
takes off. And then they have a premiumization strategy. Again, their premiumization strategy was through innovation and doing that on that particular brand.
Yeah. So that's actually that's so interesting. Now, then the culture aspect starts to take shape. Now that we've kind of said to people, here's this new way of beers, and at the same time, these new green bottle beers. At the same time, there's a lot of fight within the space, right? You've got the Peronis coming into the space, the Grolsch's coming into the space, and there's a lot of Stella, I think, came back. There was a lot of fight for that premiumization green bottle space. But then culturally, certain brands make the right moves, like a Castle Light, right? Sure. They attach themselves to hip-hop festivals in a massive way.
Sure.
Maybe give us an understanding of how those live events and those massive gathering moments kind of shaped those brands particularly, and Castle Light, to kind of shoot off even more and become part of the lexicon.
I think the big thing you've got to probably look at is when you're doing that STP, your marketing segmentation, targeting, positioning, and then you look at consumers' passion points. I think there's universal truths around passion points, whether it's cooking, whether it's music, then how do you bring that to life based on your brand's positioning and what your brand's about? And then how does that translate well to your reason to believe?
Yeah.
And so the whole Castle Light, again, they did it very well in unlocking.
Yeah.
Castle Light called Unlocking. And they were even bringing international artists down in the cold times, in the winter.
Yeah, like Nas, J. Cole, Drake.
They did that effectively, which made them very cool. Then from a culture market, I think that's going back to that sort of culture marketing perspective.
Yeah.
Miller Genuine Draft did it well, in fact, when it was still under SAB. There was a period in time where, from a culture perspective, boots on ground, getting I'd almost call it the street team, the guys who are on the ground, youngsters, very excited about the brand through local hip-hop.
Yeah.
Getting that local hip-hop feel and energy into that brand. And then just doing it with fresh consistency through the years or over time. Castle Light did it well. They looked more at the international, bringing that international flavor of hip-hop into the country, big artists and so forth, bring it into the brand. They had this whole Castle Light Unlocks.
Yes.
And that whole thing, unlocking. Yeah.
So that's so interesting, because we were part of a couple of those drives where we had to build massive influencer teams.
And that's it.
To kind of drive up a lot of excitement around who are we unlocking. And people would be like, no, it's Drake, no, it's J. Cole, no, it's... And that it infused the brand into the culture. And then the expectation grew from consumers to say, every single year, Castle Light brings us somebody. And also Kendrick, his first time here was through Miller. So there was an understanding that through the hip-hop culture, through this cultural wave that was sweeping the nation at the time, you've got your AKAs, the KOs, the Coolie Chanas, etc. That's our golden age up until I think 2019, 18.
Sure.
Golden age of South African hip-hop. Yep. Brands jump on, and a lot more people. Did that translate into numbers, actually?
100%. 100%. That there's an uptick. Like, the time... And some of my friends who are still sort of in the industry were working. So again, I move away from, I work for 2 years and I move on to Pernod, and I work for Pernod for another 10 years.
Yeah.
And there were friends of mine who worked, who continued, like ex-colleagues who continued to work, and they were telling me the numbers came through from a brand like Miller. So I'll speak specifically on a brand like Miller. Yeah. Yes, numbers completely came through. A brand like Castle Light remains one of the foremost and biggest brands in South Africa. In that alcohol space, and I think just as a brand, period, in South Africa. So
now let's get to my sore point. This is my particular sore point. SAB, AB InBev. Their buyout, merger, whatever you want to call it. I get really emotional about this. I get emotional because, to me, South African breweries was built by South Africans, by South African marketers, business people, by South African consumers, and it maybe it still is, maybe it's, and I'm emotional about it, but to me, I felt like it was one of those things that South Africa had for the world, right? We, at the time, obviously we didn't know that there was other things. We had a couple of companies, you know, at the time, I guess this was one of our key companies. It was a clear company that South Africa had built, and we went into global markets and we competed fairly, and we beat out a lot of guys. In fact, the guys wanted to merge with us because they would see, geez, these South Africans know what they're doing when it comes to beer. Whether we're in China, whether we're in Eastern Europe, whether we're in America, we're fighting. Whether we're in South America, we're fighting, and our brands are there. There's a decision to obviously sell South African breweries and to merge it into AB InBev, right? A global company, the number one company. I think for me, it's still insane how the number one company can buy the number two company. But be that as it may, South Africa has really core interest in that through our public investment corporation, etc. And we are part and parcel of this thing. And dare I say, many people would get touched about it because the conversation of liquor in South Africa and apartheid is also very touchy. So we finally kind of, you could say, have a grip on this thing. It's now not as divisive socially as what it was and what it was meant to be in certain instances. But this is something that's growing brands, building brands, employing people. And there's conversations around SAB being like, there used to be this running joke that says, if you wanna kind of like professionalize the state or get the guys from SAB to deliver stuff, right? To deliver services. And that's how excellent SAB was. Now, I'm emotional about it because I did work next to one or two brands around SAB at the time, and I saw the innovations that they were doing, and I saw what impact they were having on communities positive. We can have the other discussion maybe a little bit later around how that was from a societal perspective, and we'll have that conversation because it needs to be had in balance. We have this company, and a decision is taken to sell it. Now, the upside, a lot of guys had shares, a lot of guys cashed out. I mean, I heard some scary numbers. There were guys that were getting 15 to 20 million rand out of that, just a general guy. And it's cool, it's flash, it's whatever, but we're left with now the SAB as it is. Maybe give us an understanding, not of the decision to sell, but of the feeling that changed within the market relative to the guys. You had already left, I think, around that time. Yeah. You were already in the Euro market for that. But give us an understanding of how guys felt and also what it meant globally that this South African brand, this great South African brand, had now been kind of swallowed up by AB InBev.
Ambivalent feeling. I think that's the word I would use, because of course they took care of the employees so well, and the employees took care of the marketplace from a consumer perspective. So one of the, if not for me, from a local perspective, in my, again, limited sort of, but my understanding is one of the best professional learning development environments that this country, and I think in any, I'd actually put the things that I looked at that SAB was doing, that was back in 2012 to 2014 when I worked there. Yeah. That I still look at as the gold standard today. Yeah. Having moved around with my career and looked at what other organizations are doing. Yeah. They were very intentional about a lot of things. And I think from just developing the talent pipelines, globalization as you speak up, they did it effectively. Yeah. So it was sore. It hurt. Yeah. It hurt a lot of people. Yeah. And I mean, again, I had already left and I wasn't that, I'd say my seniority wasn't that high up. Yeah. But what I'd again heard, the hearsay, was that a lot of the guys who had built up the business, previous chairmen, and were incredibly hurt by that decision.
30-year plus guys, eh? 30, 40 years, literally. And Green Blazer guys at SAB.
And built it up. Honestly, when I say built it up, literally went from South Africa. Yeah. Some guys were sent to the US to go fix when they did the Miller acquisition, went to was sent out there strategically and turned that business around. So they'd done a lot. So those guys who'd actually built that business, notwithstanding that the guys who made the decision to sell had also contributed greatly to the business. Yeah. So that sale, it hurt the pride from a pride perspective, from the contribution that it made to so many people's lives and careers. Yeah. That was difficult. On the other side, of course, the flip side that you're speaking about is that there was the SABs and Zelle. Yeah. So that those who, they took care of the employees very well. So people
that was a great
who
share
got
scheme,
out,
by the way.
oh my gosh,
Great share scheme.
I regretted, in a sense,
Cashing
and
out
there's
too
a lot
early.
of getting out too early of the business. I mean,
That was a massive thing.
it's just like if I'd stuck around, the what ifs.
Yeah.
It's like one of those what ifs where you go, if I'd stuck around. And again, there's some guys who mentor me, who remain sort of close in my circles and mentor me. And they also like, oh, I wish I would have stayed a little bit longer. But of course, we can always go back and forth with that. But again, it got sold to AB InBev.
Yeah.
Those guys come in, they start running the business a little bit differently locally. It creates a bit of flux. If I look at the leadership team now, I think it's back to having full South Africans, and I think they're back on the right. There was a point in time that they brought in Budweiser. It's very difficult to sit from the outside and criticize, but you can critique.
Yeah.
They came in, the guys from abroad came in, brought in Budweiser, and they wanted to push Bud and sort of sideline Castle Light.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's getting those efficiencies globally, and I think that was the thing.
The economies of scale.
Yeah, that's it. Scale. But it was just like, it just didn't really work. It didn't take off. South Africans, in my view, rejected it. I don't have the numbers.
Yeah.
I don't look at any data or research.
But it's
again,
not as prevalent. On trade, off trade,
You see it and you go, Bud, by the South African consumer, again, you look at it over, like, let's say a 3 to 5 year period, they went, this ain't it.
Yeah.
And I think they went back to going, look, these are the power brands. Let's look at them again and let's focus on them. Sort of Castle Light, Castle Lager, Black Label, and again Hansa perhaps to a lower level, and some other ones to a lower level. Hansa at the time when I was working there was big,
massive, top 4. It was a top 4 brand.
That's it. So that's why I called it out. But over time, some things had happened there, and it was difficult for it to compete and remain relevant with the other 3 brands. And
it's very, very, very important insights, I think. And again, you do get emotional having worked with for the brand, etc. And I mean, there was, maybe it's still there, but there was a lot of pride. There was a lot of pride with SAB guys. I mean, look, again, like what I was saying around the ladies that were picked for Red Bull cars, minis.
Sure.
There was a certain type of person, guy or girl, male, female, who worked at SAB, and very motivated guys. That's why they kept on winning almost every year, best employer. Like, it's rare that people would want to leave that space, and it just really, it's one of those. I'm emotional about it because I'm a South African, but I'm a patriot of this country, and I think that if it was tantamount to selling MTN. If the country ever said, it's literally like, we've got to keep these things, because there's very few brands that are South African that go out there and fight globally the way that SAB, the MTNs, the Investex have done. And these are also just brands that need to be also celebrated at home for the innovation, the people that we're sending globally out there. I want to get into a much more cooler space now and conversation, less emotional. Clubonomics. Okay. You've worked in the liquor and beverage space for so long. Clubonomics. The funny thing about this Clubonomics conversation is that it's a thing that we kind of coined, I think late 2000s, when we started to kind of like going out in Joburg and around, and it was this thing of kind of being economical with your money and getting the best experience out of clubbing, right? Sure. In a time where a lot of guys, I think, would want to stand alone, and bottles the bottle culture was starting. The bottle culture, Sky Vodka was, Sky 90 was 990 Rand, and they'd give you 900 mils or whatever, almost a liter. Maybe give an understanding how the clubbing culture, when you were in the beverage space and actually working. So for you going to, and I'd go with you and get into these places, and you were at work there.
Sure.
How has clubbing culture and that particular moment of consuming a beverage changed over time as you've gone, and how does it compare to the global market? Because I want to now go global in our understanding. Sure.
So if you look at South Africa from a consumption, specifically alcohol consumption perspective, follows, from my understanding, 2 markets or 2 regions very closely. The first being the US. USA, so what's happening over there, we kind of look at it and we adopt that. We do have our own distinct way of doing things. However, we do look to them quite a bit. The second one is also London.
Okay.
You know, London's another space that we kind of look at. And first, number one, USA by far, and then number two, London we also look at. Now, when you look at from a club perspective, I think it coincides with sort of, if you look at South Africa's economy, and what happens, again, inside black middle class going up. And I think that coincides, funny enough, with Jameson kind of having targeted correctly.
Yeah, black diamonds at that time.
Black middle class, kind of the growth, the Thabo Mbeki era. Yeah. Things are going well economically and people start buying international.
We had an actual surplus, guys. Like South Africa had a surplus.
International goods. That translates also within the alcohol space. Yeah. So when you look at the clubbing space now, you go into the clubs and initially people are drinking, let's call it brandy and Coke. It's economical.
It's brakpan. It's pretty much brakpan. No hate to brakpan people, but it's proper brakpan.
The channel, when you look at the channel split, I'll say the channel split by volume. Yeah. Beer, funny enough, is still a bit of a 50-50. People drink 50% beer from buying it at the bottle store and 50% is actually consumed in the on-trade or taverns. Wow. Because taverns are still
massive.
Huge. 60%, in fact.
60% of the beer volumes go through taverns.
Alcohol. But beer, because beer in the total alcohol market in South Africa is 74%.
Wow.
So, of course, wherever the beer is being consumed the most, taverns, that channel will be the biggest, which is quite informal. It's an informal, taverns should be, it's a very informal space.
But they've formalized it quite well, eh?
They've done well.
Considering that, and obviously now I'm juxtaposing that with the Spaza market. Yes. Taverns are owned by South Africans.
100%.
They've done that really well. And I think it's one of those where we should probably look at how they've done it. Because they are mom and pop shops. People might not like the proliferation of them, right? Sure. But they're very well regulated.
100%. And then you look at how alcohol even gets there. That's a different conversation. But independent redistributors, IRDs.
Yes.
So there's a whole distribution model that works for taverns and how to get.
Does that allow for taverns to be more regulated because you can regulate the people that bring the stock? Is that how it works?
That's it.
So maybe in Spaza shops, I know I'm just spitballing here. We should look at the people that are producing the food and get them to kind of not police, but to regulate a lot of the people that they give to.
Sure.
Possibly.
I think it's definitely worth interrogating, speaking to the guys like a Tiger Brands. I'll make an example. So Tiger Brands, so the big guys in South Africa. Yeah. And work probably closely with them and how to maybe get that right.
Yeah.
I think that may make sense in that specific case. Now let's go back to Clubonomics. Let's pulling it back to Clubonomics. So of course the economy is doing well. People are getting into, black folk getting into corporate, making money, and so that starts reflecting in the preferences of what they're buying. Yeah. Then you go and get into the club space. I mean, it depends on your age and how much money you have, your LSM. Let's talk about your LSM and how much disposable income you have. So as a student and varsity, you actually have a pretty good disposable. Yeah. Because you tend to have no expenses. Yeah. You buying food on the weekend and you drinking. You're going out to drink. Yeah. You tend to drink probably beers, ciders, and maybe you start getting into your spirits a little bit, right? RTDs, ready to drinks. That's kind of the space you're getting into. Once you start working and earning a bit, now you want to elevate. So when you're in the club space, a lot of things that you see is around, number one, things that sort of get people in why they drink what they drink. Yeah. Badging is one of them. Okay. I want to show other people how economically where I am. So that's how
social proofing.
Social proofing. How do I differentiate myself from the rest? I buy a bottle. That bottle culture comes into play. USA is doing it. They've been talking about bottles since forever actually, you know. And hip hop is being played in the clubs. That sort of space, that feel now. We've got that feel. And you want to show up in a specific way. Yeah. So having a bucket full of beers, you can do that. And some Heineken, I think, does it quite well. Castle Light has been able to do that quite well. But very few other beers. Miller probably, Corona now, is doing that quite well. But my Kachwe, that's the number one thing is the bottle. Yeah. Now the bottle, number one, first badging, as we're talking about it. And you can see the POS, the point of sale material. Yeah. So if you buy a bottle of Hennessy, I see it. I mean, I was out the other day and I was looking at Hennessy does that very, very well. Yeah. When you buy a bottle, it's a light show.
It's a light show.
I remember when Moet used to have that. Remember the cages and the
chalices. The Magnum. They used to have the Magnum.
And it comes in a golden cage and there's chalices.
And they stop the music and they push it out and there's
flares.
And there's ladies that say yes. Sometimes they even show your name.
That's it. So that badging. So I'm just highlighting that. That's one big aspect when you think about when people are drinking and what they want to drink.
Yeah.
Then the number 2 is also shareability.
Yeah.
So you're going, I can buy one bottle and everyone here can drink it. And that's where that taste and the profile in terms of the liquid of a brand. And Jameson does well in that. Vodka used to do well until vodka started coming down a bit. Gin, when gin was kind of, now I mean it's big, but gin, the kinds of gin, you can all drink it. Yeah. So also universal appeal in terms of palate,
yes,
and drinkability.
Yeah.
And that's another thing you have to look at in that club space.
Yeah.
Those I think would be the 2. And then of course economics.
Yeah.
What are you getting per
glass,
per whatever. And I think that then we can speak about when we started sort of going out into the Joburg club scene and really getting into it, Sky 90.
Yeah, it just made economical sense.
It made economical sense.
Yeah.
When you could go, they had a very good, I think that was a very interesting one from a price point versus it was $900 and it was
$990.
$990. So the whole thing, like we sell it to you for $990. The pack size actually format.
But they got us on the cranberry though. The cranberry. I want to know. Maybe you could comment if you still are a big vodka drinker in sort of like club scenes. Tell us how much like a jug of cranberry costs now, because I think it was 100 rand back then.
I think it's about 500 now.
500 rand for cranberry,
like,
bro.
Look, if you're gonna, people want to be smart and go, I'll cover the mixes, you cover the bottle. You could actually be in for a bigger bill.
Yeah.
Just from the mixes.
Just three and you already...
That's it.
Whew.
That's it. You saw that thing of going...
And people use a lot more mixer than they use on thing.
Yep.
So I want to actually talk about the champagne market.
Sure.
And in this whole conversation around Clubonomics, something happens in South Africa, the same kind of conditions, the perfect storm happens, people are getting a lot more money, etc., etc. Baller culture starts to take place.
Sure.
South Africa's like... I think at one stage we touched number 1, then I think we're number 2. It was literally based off economics, where us in Nigeria were fighting for number 1 and number 2 spot, most highest drinkers or consumers of champagne
on the continent.
The continent, yeah. So when that happens, we see an influx of different brands, and it was new to South Africans, right? We had obviously our sparkling with the JCs, etc., but they had never thought to kind of really market push into the market. Then you got the Graham Becks that came over. Now we've got the Leludes. We've got so many others. And Amari's, shout out Sazi Ngobo. He's a good mate of ours. He's got a MCC, which is a Method Cup Classique. Yep. So give us maybe an understanding of that. This is now, the economics, when you talk about Clubonomics, the economics of champagne or MCC in the club, they literally don't make sense.
At all.
How many glasses do you get on one bottle?
Regularly, you should get 6 to 8. 8 you pouring. Small. Again, depending on the drinking ritual and how to pour, but you get to 6 to 8. But when you're in the club, people are pouring right to the brim.
And champagne has a lot of friction, eh? Yeah. Champagne, like who's drinking it, so there's that feel of, and I guess it lends itself to your conversation around the badging, 100%. Right? This table has more bottles, 100%. That table has less bottles. What bottles are they getting?
A lot of the champagne consumption from an on-trade perspective, again, in the clubs.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes down to literally how the brand's been built up, and what people think about it.
Yeah.
And then there's another conversation that no one's really having outside of the industry. So in the industry we know, which is the rations. So the production of champagne and where it will go in the world is a big thing. They can't overproduce in a sense.
Oh.
It's limited numbers, limited capacity, limited. So there's so you get stock allocations.
Okay.
So the big thing about it is stock allocation. So that also influences pricing, right? Sometimes you go, guys, we don't have the stock this year.
Yeah.
So drought hits.
Because it's made of
drought hits
grape.
Drought hits or some sort of material conditions make make it such that that batch that year is down.
Oh, man.
And so sometimes they just go, well, you're not getting any. And so that also drives the price up.
So there's less champagne. Let's say there's, for instance, there's less champagne in South Africa.
Supply and demand, yeah. Supply and demand.
I did not know that.
So that
agriculture.
That's it. Something that happens in what they call the terroir, which is the sort of
the Champagne region.
The region in Champagne. So what happens there, the material conditions there impact down the line what happens in South Africa.
Whether or not a BE guy can pop after the deal is done.
Basically.
Wow.
And then that's also what happens on the brands themselves. So you go, without naming again whatever brands, but they go, how much do we sell in that country and what's our profitability?
Yeah.
Big thing for the wine and spirits business, in the sort of premium into super premium. You have to look at those numbers. That's the way that they get. So they go, what's the profitability over there? How much do they do?
Yeah.
How prominent is that brand? And they go, well, yeah, rather take the stock, send it to China perhaps. Let's say, or send it to the USA, or send it to another country where the brand, maybe it's more competitive.
Yeah.
And the pricing, and it's more profitable.
Yeah.
And that also does happen.
Because do we buy, obviously we buy it in either euros or dollars globally, and we bring it here.
Euros usually.
Euros usually, because champagne,
French.
it's French.
Yeah.
And that affects, this is really mind blowing. So global economics and climate change play a part in the price of champers and the availability of champagne in South Africa. But South Africans have moved to Method Cup Classique, which is the Cape Classic method of making sparkling wine. And South Africans have really adopted that. I know you're not in the market per se, but give us maybe an understanding of what's going on there.
So from my understanding there, it's the premiumization has happened and is happening quite well. Still the benchmark of quality based on perception.
Yes.
Use the word perception of quality, benchmarked. So still at the highest level, they still look at champagne, which comes from France. Yeah. Imported goods, international brands that have an international feel, that are being consumed by, again, the market that they look at, the USA. So the US celebrities are consuming this.
How they celebrate,
how they celebrate.
F1. F1's a big play.
All of those.
Big deal with the LVMH.
Yeah, now that it's shifted.
Yes.
So, it's shifted to LVMH. But again, you're looking at that, what's happening out there in the big spaces. And then I think what's happened effectively, which I think kudos to the local guys, the local producers from an MCC, which is MCC is a South African produced champagne essentially. They do it exactly the same way. Yeah. They can't call it champagne because from which region in the world and so forth.
Just like they can't call, I remember we had a weird thing with the EU where the EU kind of, obviously we can't call it champagne because it's made here. Yes. So we did the same thing when it came to Rooibos. We said you can't say Rooibos tea because Rooibos, the particular plant, can only be gotten in one area of South Africa. So you can't call your thing, which is so crazy. But these are also the intellectual property, the global space of intellectual property, and because it's an asset to the country, because we export a lot of Rooibos. So and they do the same with champagne. Yeah,
100%. So the MCCs then start getting their branding, distribution, qualitatively, all of that, they start getting it right. Yeah. And I think now they're competitive. They actually, if I go out, and again, if I'm doing a small dipstick test and I'm going out and I'm looking around and what people are consuming, I can look at the IWSR numbers too. You can see a big uptick, again, at a higher price point, higher price band, because before they were kind of, I think they were selling themselves short. Yeah. But they've caught up qualitatively, packaging, those 4 P's of marketing. They've got those right now, right? Pricing themselves right, promoting themselves effectively,
putting them in
and
the right
premiumizing,
places.
Premiumizing,
places,
essentially premiumizing themselves. So I think they currently are doing very well in that regard. Yeah.
So I think we're tailing off, and now I want to kind of have conversations around, particularly the global space. You're a global brand and marketing manager. You started off in Amsterdam, and then now in Paris. Give me an understanding of that, and then also start to weave in a lot of the expatriate conversation, right? Okay. As a South African, coming from this heritage of understanding the beverages and liquor industry quite well from an African context, and then going into that space, but also, what does that mean? Like, how different is it?
So let me maybe take it one step back quickly.
Yeah.
To go, okay, I did the Jameson role, did that for 2 years. Then I moved into a regional brand and trade marketing manager role.
Yeah.
Looking at a few countries in the SADC region across a number of brands. So I got a really good feel for African experience, I'd say, a bit of African experience and how things move and how to get business over the line there. Thereafter, then I get an opportunity to move to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
To go work on Malibu, in fact, which was a big brand for them over there. And I did that for 3 years.
Yeah.
But I effectively stayed in Amsterdam for 3.5 years in the Netherlands. And then, so that was a local role.
Yeah.
But I worked much closer to the global team for that particular brand, which is Malibu.
Yeah.
And those guys were based in Stockholm. But the work that I was doing on Malibu specifically was world leading. I got an international award for some of the work that we're doing there.
Shout out.
Shout out. Very challenging for me. And that was simply because I moved over there when I was 30.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the Dutch consumer, which is legal drinking age 18 to 21, essentially.
Yeah.
And I had to understand, I mean, I just moved overseas. And and then now I'm working on the crown jewel for that
market.
Dutch market for that particular business. And I have to understand this consumer set and kind of really mining the insights and getting a digital first approach and really doing that. So that was a very interesting, I'd say, work and brand that I worked on. And then I moved, and then I got a promotion at work, and then I became the global marketing manager, one of the global marketing managers for Havana Club, which came with a very interesting story, with them being half owned by the Cuban government, half owned by the French spirits company.
You had a lot of travel issues.
Look, 2 passports, maxis. I'm on
your fourth.
I'm on my third
passport.
Third passport now. Full. I got to travel a lot. I think, if I counted correctly, I think I've done 24 countries. Globally. And my scope of work in my final or my last role, working in the export division or export team, where I'm looking at, then you're looking at proper international business management. You're looking at P&Ls. You're looking at business development, brand development. How profitability, big one. How to really build a brand effectively globally, and how to build it in specific markets, where it is today, where it will be tomorrow, where it will be in 5 years, and really trying to build that out for different markets. So really, if I look at the sort of, I've worked pretty in depth with the UK, Ireland, Western Europe. So you're talking Switzerland, Germany, Benelux, into Central Europe, so the Polands as well. So you can kind of get in there, into sort of now Turkey and some of the Middle Eastern sort of bloc, and then coming out and covering the whole of Africa too.
Wow.
So a lot of exposure there. And really, again, global way of thinking about the logistics challenges to get the product from A to B, to C, in fact. And just really getting an understanding of that. And then looking at global trends. Tequila, doing incredible numbers in the USA, and then that becoming a global trend. But perhaps that globalization of that trend stops and starts somewhere. So somewhere like where you go, sometimes in Europe. Western Europe might be a bit slow to pick some things up. Another one is the hard seltzers. Another just going in a different direction also. Blows up in the USA. And then everyone's going, this is going to do phenomenally well everywhere in the world. Lower calories, blah, blah. It really only does so in, I'd say, Anglo-Saxon gym bro markets, or gym babe and gym bro markets, where in the UK it does relatively well. In Australia it does relatively well. But few other markets really adopted it. So some of those things do happen where we think, it's a global boom, but it's actually what we can call it a multi-market boom. You can call it. Tequila's doing well. So tequila in particular, that has done astronomically well, especially at a specific price point.
Like
so you got the Casamigos, actually,
first Don Julio's,
Avion,
Avion
has done well. So again, some of those are doing astronomically well, but multi-market, you have to maybe give it a bit more time and see if it will, in fact, fully globalize. Categories that are fully global. Vodka. Fully global.
You shocked me with this vodka thing. I remember. The other thing is that when brands market less, you initially assume that they're receding. But what you said about vodka shocked me. You said globally? Where's vodka?
Globally, the two leading categories globally in the spirits business, whiskeys, vodka. That's number one and number two.
You would think gin, eh?
So gin, the thing is also, it's a thing of, if you're in this market, yes, gin ran and gin number one in terms of volumes here. Yeah. It is number one. And again, there are brands from a price point perspective that just make sense for the material conditions of South Africa too. Yeah. Old Buck
is huge. Listen, I've done a few mqimbis this year. I've bought a lot of Old Buck in the Eastern Cape.
Doing phenomenal numbers. Belgravia, another brand I can talk about, literally went from like 0 to 100 overnight, and they had such a such an amazing story in terms of just how they kept price. They just kept taking price. Let's build the volumes.
Yes.
We've got a product, again, that will do the numbers. You hardly saw any out of home, any billboards. No premiumization.
They hardly ever.
Then they hit you with a double whammy. On one side, they had the actual gin, the bottle of gin. Yeah. Then they give you the gin and tonic pre-mixed also. People were then dashing the gin. They were like gin on gin on gin. I was watching people going, what is going on? And the volumes literally went. So again,
they're a fighter in that segment, eh?
So gin in South Africa. So it's so market specific and dependent. Gin had its huge run. UK, massive. Several markets picked up really well. Also South Africa, massive. Massive. And that's why I also say that South Africa does follow the UK.
The UK and the US trend, yeah.
So massive, but globally, vodka still. It might seem from where we are sitting in South Africa specifically.
Gin is a massive thing globally, but we're just hypermarketed on.
We just took it on, and we ran with it again. Think about those Clubonomics we're speaking about.
Yeah.
The first one being that premiumization thing. I think vodka got a bit of fatigue in South Africa. Yeah. There was a point in time, I mean, you had the Grey Goose and this and the Sky and Ciroc and
those guys priced themselves out quite quickly.
And that price point's very high. I mean, Smirnoff 1818 still a massive brand. I think it's number 2 in terms of volumes in South Africa. So Old Buck, I think, is number 1 based on the last IWSR report, which is what I'm sort of basing some of the knowledge on. And number 2 is Smirnoff 1818, which is number 2. So it's still, I mean, globally, from a volume perspective, vodka, still number 2. Still solid. And some of these things are cyclical. Yeah. Right? That's another thing. Like, so now gin, there's fatigue. Yeah. There's fatigue, at least from a UK perspective. That's going to come in here. So I'd say now, craft gins are probably going to start feeling the pinch. Yeah. Flavored gins were starting to feel the pinch. People are just going, why don't I just buy an Old Buck, a Stretson's, a Belgravia and mix? And that clearing out of it became very cluttered also. Yeah. There's it went from, we had Gordon's and blah, 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 and blah, 4 gins.
Just so many,
to 300 gins and gins coming up overnight all the time.
The Whitley Neals, the Inverroshes, the Bulldogs,
and some really did well. I mean, I think Inverrosh, great taste, quality, product, blah, blah, blah. Packaging, branding.
Was it not bought
by? It was acquired by Pernod.
It was
acquired by Pernod Ricard. Yeah. I think it was a
South African brand, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think the struggle will be for a lot of these gin brands now is where they are globally. What the gin trend is in you have to now look at the world and go, what's going to happen in those multiple markets? Yeah, it's the tequilas on the rise. Let's call it that. Tequila's on the rise. So people now opting for tequila and tequila-based drinks. So you get those tequila cocktails.
It was so strange for me when we were in things. Sorry to cut you off. It was so strange.
No worries.
I remember we were a thing at your place in Paris, and you mixed tequila, that is straight. Yeah. And I was like, wait, what's going on here? Yeah. And you're like, no, it's actually because remember, to us as South Africans, we've been sold a particular way and moment to have tequila. Sure. But in other markets, they have tequila like a normal whiskey, like a normal brandy, I guess, they chase it with something and then you just drink it.
So that's the thing, right? So occasion-based need state marketing that we were speaking about before. Also qualitatively, perhaps we weren't exposed in South Africa to the best tasting and quality tequilas, which now have come in at a higher price point and so forth.
They're less harsher, I guess.
There we go.
Yeah.
They're less harsh. Same thing happened with sort of vodka. We had the vodkas that we had initially, which from a taste perspective were a bit tough on the palate, and then we got to better vodkas that came in from an international blah blah blah, qualitatively bit more expensive. But that happened with tequila too, and now you can sit there and you can do the same thing with tequila. Exactly what you're talking about, where yes, they still have a big part of it, and I think in South Africa the shot occasion is still it still rules the roost. In fact, I was looking again, IWSR numbers, Jägermeister is under pressure. Because Jaeger was the market for shots.
100%.
They owned the market for shots. But then tequila came through because people just go, if I'm shooting it, why don't I have it then in my drink too? Why don't I have it in my cocktail? I can do a Paloma, I can do all these type of different cocktails. It's just slipping my mind with the rim with the salt, the tequila cocktail. But they've moved into the cocktail, and they've been able to do that quite effectively over the last 3 years, again, based on USA.
Global trends.
USA.
That's so how they drink it ultimately filters out, because a lot of US people vacation in Europe, 100%. And that's they kind of push the trends, etc.
That's it.
That's super amazing. Okay, I want to kind of get into, as we kind of close the conversation, the moral conversation of that the liquor industry has to kind of deal with.
Sure.
From a perspective of, I think at times, in recent times, I've seen the liquor industry really push for responsible drinking. It's a lot of governments globally have mandated that as much as they push the occasions and the niceties of it all, they need to push the other side, and thus the zeros have become a thing as part of that, where the consciousness of consumers has changed, etc. Let's talk about the moral question, and the moral question that a lot of people have around liquor and the beverage industry. And yes, it employs a lot of people, etc. But how do you guys balance that, or how did you guys balance that relative to sort of like the responsibility that is placed on yourselves and as well as consumers?
So, from my experience with different markets and different organizations, you have regulatory bodies that look into this. So it's a heavily regulated industry, in fact, and they try to protect the consumer as far as possible without taking away their freedom of choice and their freedom to. So you've got, of course, from an age perspective, you should only be allowed to drink from a specific age where you are now mature enough to make specific decisions and act in a specific way. And then when you're advertising, in fact, so that it doesn't appeal to a younger audience, that is also regulated. And when you're putting an ad together, first of all, you've got probably a regulatory body within each organization. Sort of a responsible, one of the organizations had something called a responsible marketing panel. So if you're going to do the big advertising, they'd have to look and go, this is not going to work because it's A, B, C, D, E, wise. It's not going to work. It's irresponsible to market this way. It's going to appeal to an underage audience, or it's going to be discriminatory, or it's going to be da-da-da. So there's that piece. So, and then the organization's also putting money behind advertising and talking about, one of them was a campaign I remember recently was a drink more water campaign. So make sure so they in fact now advertise that. They put money. You know.
We thought it was a hack.
It was a hack, and they were like,
no, drink water at the end of the night.
They're like, no. They'll put together, they go to festivals, treating it almost like a normal campaign, like making sure that from
people are having enough water.
Points, are you guys having enough water? Drink more water. And then, of course, you then take that a step further, and then even now producing brands which are 0.0 and getting those to the right qualitative level that people are going to take them seriously. Beers have done it well thus far. Gin as a category. I'm yet to see other categories effectively do it the same way that those two have. But again, it's that taste, making sure that taste qualitatively makes sense to consumers, that they can opt to drink a 0.0 and make sure it tastes like they still, I guess, drinking. Because they enjoy the taste of alcohol. They enjoy the taste of whatever that beverage that they are drinking, and doing it for 0.0 makes sense. So the moralistic question is a tough one.
Yeah.
Especially coming from South Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had those conversations with myself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I see the efforts being done.
Yeah.
By the organizations, putting money where their mouths are. I've been on the side of like where I need to present a campaign or the bigger campaigns and so forth, where they are being regulated internally.
Yeah.
So there is that regulatory aspect and responsible aspect that the organizations themselves, from my experience, are doing.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to get into the expert conversation, but I feel like time is killing us. Are we dying on time? We're dying on time.
Sure.
Maybe we'll have we'll have the conversation around expat living abroad, that type of stuff. Maybe separately.
Yeah, I've done it for 6 years.
Yeah.
In 2 different countries within the European space. But I can talk about that journey.
Yeah.
But it does, if it does require time, we
must,
need to ventilate it.
I think we need to give it time, because one of our better performing or above average performing videos was about South Africans coming back home, ones that had left. But we don't want to get into that.
Sure.
Ungeziwe Masonwabe, Lupuwana, Zibula.
Sure.
Thank you so much for enlightening us. I think you have really illuminated an industry that is around people, but they never really have thought about a lot of the stuff. We see it from a marketing and advertising perspective, trying to get it out there. You guys are the ones that are ultimately building the great brands, and you're the ones that are pushing it out there and creating moments of enjoyment. Because as much as I guess we do have the moral conversation around it, there is a responsible way to enjoy alcohol and to kind of to kind of celebrate moments. That's why if there were no moments to celebrate, I think all those brands pushing for celebration of moments would not be selling as much. And there are things that people are doing really well, and we as South Africa have really embraced the culture. We've built a massive brands and companies that we've taken abroad, and I thank you for your time. I thank you for your expertise. Thank you. I think this conversation is one that started just at like a breakfast table at home, and we ended up saying, no, we need to put it on a podcast so that people can kind of to comment as well as suggest. So guys, please, if you've reached this point of the podcast, whatever platform you're kind of listening on, please comment, tag us, have conversations. I think it's at Oz Lupuwana, ne?
Yeah.
At Oz Lupuwana on Insta, but he doesn't post. A marketer who doesn't post, but it's fine. There's a method to the madness. Method to the madness. Oz Lupuwana, Instagram, Twitter. I don't even think you are on TikTok, but you're not really there because you had to be there to understand the trends, right?
That's it.
But yeah, Zibula, thank you so much. Yeah, man, great conversation.
Thank you.